Welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and McLean. Mac, it has been Tech Week here on the show. We're getting technical. We talked about Virginia Tech earlier in the week, and now we're going to talk about Georgia Tech. And I've really enjoyed both these interviews, both these discussions, because both these programs are in such interesting situations. Yeah. Georgia Tech probably in a better spot right now. And we had Chad Bishop from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He was so good, Mac. Really enjoyed his insight. Got to relive the Miami win. Oh. And honestly, I was sad to relive Georgia Tech, Georgia, because I can't even remember the last time I rooted that hard.
Right.
For a team that wasn't my own. I was so emotionally invested. And just to see Brent Key, I still want to go give him a hug after that game. It was brutal, but I think we learned a lot from it.
It was so brutal. And I just to give you guys kind of a glimpse, we were in Blacksburg. It's -2 degrees, freezing cold. And, you know, we didn't really have any expectation because, again, we thought that King was hurt. Georgia's rolling. They're pissed off. They want to, show they're the best team in the country. And so we were all kind of like, oh, we'll just watch it in our rooms. And it ended up being one of the craziest games of the year. I mean, it was so much fun. And I'll never forget, we're all just going back and forth, like in a group text about the game. Like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And Taylor had said something. She's like, I'm literally standing on the corner of my bed. And I was doing the exact same thing. I'm just sitting there watching.
Yeah,
like,
on the edge of your seat.
It's crazy. You're on the edge of your seat watching the whole thing. So you're right. It was sad, but it was a great game. And it was fun to remember how much of a dog Haynes King was that game. He's so good. And just to see the future, it's going to be fun to see what can they do? Who are they going to be? Because it could be really, really cool. So Speaking of dogs, you guys always see it. It's right here. Rowback. Come on, check us out. You got to get yourself
nice
some
transition.
Of that. You like me? I'm trying. Go to their website, hook it up. We told you about the babies. Their hoodies just got back. A ton of other stuff. I worked out this morning, and this again, it's the best stuff. I'm glad that I loaded up. So go to their website, use our code GMPOD, get you 20% off. But before that, we'll have a little video, and then let's get to the interview.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Chad Bishop, brother, great to see you. Just to kind of let people know about your night, you were up until who knows how long. You were in Littlejohn until at least 1 a.m. watching a little hoops, a little basketball, big win for Georgia Tech there. And then you hit the road, I think you said 4:30 or something to get back for this. This is great, man. Thank you for joining us.
9 p.m. tip. I'm like, I did this in 2024, and I'm like, this time I'm going to get a hotel room. 9 p.m. tip. I'll be back in the hotel before midnight. 1 overtime, 2 overtimes, 3 overtimes. Didn't leave the arena till 1, not asleep until 2. It's just like, it's like, do I drive back after the game? I'm stuck in Atlanta traffic on a morning. So lose for me, but win-win for the old Yellow Jackets and the Fighting Damon Stoudemire's.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. KG and I, we talk about this all the time. It's cool what we all do, right? We get to be around sports and do all this, but the travel, people don't usually see that part, KG, and it's a grind sometimes.
Oh yeah, the amount of times I've driven back. I drove back after doing a 9 p.m. game in Blacksburg last year, and it was a real questionable decision. Like, I'm not sure I should have done that. But, in the end, we do what we got to do.
When you get behind the driver's seat, right, you're like, oh, yeah, let's go. Let's go. Like, an hour later, you're like, why?
This is the worst decision of my life.
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly. Yeah, totally feel you on that, Chad. Well, let's talk about these Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets on the football field. What a season. I mean, a really exciting season. You look at some of these wins for Georgia Tech, starting off with the Florida State win, the Miami win, the Georgia game, craziness. So how would you, as someone who covered the team, just kind of evaluate, give us like your overarching thoughts on 2024 for Georgia Tech?
It was long. It was like a 6-month season or something. I don't know. Like, we started in August and in Dublin, Ireland, and beat a top 10 at the time Florida State team on a game-winning field goal. Had 2 bye weeks, a couple Saturdays off with a Thursday game and a Friday game, and then the bowl game at the end of December. So very, very long season. I get the sense that there wasn't a disappointment around the Georgia Tech football team. I mean, they're excited to be 7-6 and make a bowl game, but I think there's a hunger to be better, right? Like this team, could have probably won a couple more games, losing to Syracuse by 3 on the road, losing at Virginia Tech without Haynes King. Notre Dame beat them pretty good, and Louisville beat them pretty good. You mentioned Georgia losing by 2 and 8 epic overtimes. Like those are all games that they feel like they probably could have won. So again, there's not a disappointment in going 7-6 and going to a bowl game, but man, it was right there for them to maybe reach 8-9 wins in year 2 under Brent Key. The good news is I think that's a driving force for this program and this team to take that next step into 2025.
Yeah, the thing with Georgia Tech, man, it's just the schedule is always so brutal. And in a year that they finally don't have to play Clemson, well, who'd you get instead? Here goes Notre Dame. What'd they do? Just march to the national championship. Have fun with those guys. So it is just always – it's just hard. It's always a difficult schedule. And Clemson, Georgia back on the schedule this year. But I want to start week 1 or week 0, as you just mentioned, Dublin, Ireland, going across the pond there. How was that? How many days were you there if you win? And what all was that like?
Man, that was awesome. And going back to your previous point, then they played Duke, who was 5-0 at the time and had one of their best seasons in recent memory. Dublin, Ireland was amazing. I took the whole family over there, which was a questionable decision with 2 young boys. But they loved it. They had the time of their life. When I was working, the wife and the kids were sightseeing and doing some museums and some other things. I mean, done with the day, we're hopping into pubs and drinking some Guinnesses. I mean, it was perfect. And it was so fun to see the love that the Irish folks have for college football and football in general. And we joked with people at the game. I pretty much counted every NFL jersey in the stands. I mean, folks are really into American football these days and really into the game. I mean, sold out. Florida State fans everywhere, Georgia Tech fans everywhere. I showed up to the pep rally the day before the game and was shocked by the number of Georgia Tech fans who just filled this park green in the middle of the city. So it was reminiscent to me of a bowl game. People came from all over to travel for this game to open the season. And it was amazing. Once in a lifetime experience I'll never forget. Really fortunate to have been able to go. And then the game itself was great too.
Yeah, great game. I think we were all a bit surprised, but then Florida State goes on to do what they do. And then it makes a lot more sense, that win for Georgia Tech. When you look at, let's just say kind of the first half of the season, maybe pre-Notre Dame, or you could even say, if we're looking at Louisville, Duke, that area, almost pre-Haynes King injury, right? Some of those games a little disappointing. Syracuse, for sure. Louisville, it is what it is. You go there, you're going to lose. But at that point, it felt like you had handled some of the things you're supposed to handle. When you're looking at forward, after the Haynes King injury, like how much do you put some of these losses on the Haynes King injury, Virginia Tech specifically, but like how do you kind of rationalize that?
The thing that I've noticed probably more than anything, it wasn't so much that Haynes King's athletic ability wasn't available. It was more of his presence, like that kid is such a leader, and just his voice in the huddle. I think there was, it's easy for me to sit here and say from my vantage point that maybe the belief took a hit. I don't know if any of the players maybe felt that consciously, but maybe subconsciously they're like, our leader is not out there and it's going to be hard to do. Now, I will say in that Notre Dame game, they played really well early, and Zach Pyron did enough, I thought, to put his team in position to win. They just made way too many mistakes, and obviously Notre Dame turned out to be the juggernaut that they were. But that Virginia Tech game, defensively, they played awesome. They played out of their minds. But again, the offense was just so disjointed. Jamal Haynes went down with an injury early in that game. The things were just chaotic and sort of an offensive disarray. So it kind of goes back to our earlier point. Who knows what the season looks like if Haynes King is available, if Jamal Haynes is 100%. And I think that's what goes back to the point of a little bit of, what could have been, a little bit of a sense of disappointment in that 2024 season that, man, if everybody stays healthy, maybe the Jackets have a better chance in the standings. But again, That's all part of it, right? And Brent Key and staff know that you got to overcome injuries, and they're not going to make excuses about that.
Yeah, and the good thing is both those guys are back, so we'll talk about that, I'm sure, here in a little bit, which is really fun to see. Haynes and Jamal in that backfield, the things that they can do is just, it's fun. It really is to see. So when you look at Haynes King, you bringing him up, to me, man, he's just the ultimate warrior. Like he's so gritty, so tough. I mean, putting everything on the line. I mean, literally, he's out for however many weeks, and then he comes storming back against Georgia for 400 million all-purpose yards and 1 million more touchdowns. Just who is he that from your perspective, man? Because you see him in maybe a different light and more often than we get to, but who is Haynes King?
He's kind of like a movie character, like an old school, like someone you'd like a Matthew McConaughey, which they went to the same high school. Now that I think about it, but yeah, I mean, just like cowboy hat and just like talking outside of his mouth, just wants to play football. He'll cuss from time to time, and like. He just wants to go out there and play, and he wants to win like so badly, and doesn't matter if he throws for 400 or runs for 200. He'd rather have that W next to the side of his name. And I think that's why, Brent Key and his coaching staff have sort of fallen in love with him. We joked last offseason, he said he did an internship with Chris Swinkie over the summer to learn the game of football and learn how to play quarterback. So again, it's sort of what I was talking about when he was out with injury. There was a presence missing. I mean, there's no doubt about it. That guy means a lot to this Georgia Tech program and this Georgia Tech football team. And if he's able to stay healthy in 2025, I mean, who knows what type of numbers he can put up, but more importantly, who knows how many wins Georgia Tech can put up.
Yeah, and okay, going off of that, because I remember stupidly, because I'm not Brent Key and I'm not a head coach, I remember talking with Mac or previewing Georgia Tech, and I'm saying, play Aaron Philo. Like, sure. Philo's looked great. He looked really good against NC State. He's obviously super talented. He's going to be your next guy. Haynes King is obviously beat up. Like, you don't want to send him into Athens where he can barely move, not knowing that he was going to put out this virtuoso performance. But how do you see Georgia Tech, let's look forward for a second, handling Haynes King and Aaron Philo together this year?
It's the $1 million question. I've been asked a ton already. If you guys talk to Brent Key and he tells you, please let me know. It's going to be really crazy. I mean, maybe it's like a Texas situation with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, right? Like maybe they play both. Maybe it depends on the team they're playing. If they want to play Haynes King every snap or bring Aaron Philo in for a few series, it's tricky, right? Especially this day of NIL and transfer portal, keeping guys happy, making sure guys get playing time, making sure they understand their role and they're humble enough to go in there and do what they want to do for the team. I'm sure Aaron Philo understands he's the quarterback of the future of this program, but what does that look like? Does that look like not playing at all in 25, playing some here and there? It's tough, but that's why these coaches get paid six figures to figure it out. And I'm glad I'm not in that position, but I would expect both of them to see plenty of playing time in 25.
Maybe that's why these players get paid six digits too, and they stick around. Because I was fascinated just to see from the business aspect what that was going to look like, because he was a guy that went on a run. They might lose him. Right. And looked great. And, it was fascinating. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? And it sounds like a deal got done where both are happy and both are going to stay. And I have to think there was enough transparency in the meeting. Maybe it's with both of them. Maybe it's one-on-one, whatever, where, Haynes is the guy. And then Philo, you're going to have the keys to the car for 3 years if you want it. And it's interesting. Do you have any insight on that? What that deal might have looked like, or what those conversations? I know we kind of just asked you that, but any indication there?
No, not specifically, but I will say that Aaron Philo has been recruited by this Georgia Tech program for a while and has a great relationship with Buster Faulkner. And Aaron Philo went to Prince Avenue Christian, which is up the road in Athens, Georgia, and that program really has a great relationship with Georgia Tech, Brent Key, Buster Faulkner, the whole offensive staff. So I think there's some loyalty involved there too, right? Like, and like you said, we have to assume that they sat down with Aaron and Haynes and the whole staff and said, look, this is definitely Haynes' last year. He's out of eligibility after this year. So Aaron, if you stick around, if you learn from Haynes, if you learn this playbook, you're the guy moving forward, and let's just see how this works. And getting to know Aaron a little bit. I mean, he's a kid that probably understands that and understands the process and knows that if he continues to work hard, he'll be ready to go.
And I think it's KG. I think it's not apples to apples, but it is very similar with Arch Manning at Texas. I mean that family gets, hey,
Yeah.
learn, take your time, understand. The NFL's not going anywhere. Be as ready as you can be. That way, when you are the guy, it's go time and you're sprinting and you've got all this great film. There's no hiccups. There's no, freshman season lumps. It's just let's go to work. And so I just, in a day and age where we used to gotta play now, go, go, go. And even the NFL's like, oh, you're a true senior. You're a fourth year
Yeah.
junior. What's wrong with you?
Old.
Why are you? Yeah. Now it's like, no, we like this because the product is better because the player's ready. And so, KG, I think there's some time. I think it's great what they're doing, and he's going to get the keys to the car ready to go.
It's refreshing. It's refreshing to
Yes.
see. And you said the word loyalty, Chad, and I was like, oh, we still have that. I mean, but to me, that speaks to Brent Key and what he's building at Georgia Tech. So speaking of what he's building, let's talk about these 2 wins to finish the year. And, NC State, also a good win. That was a crazy game that Georgia Tech kind of tried to lose.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about Miami because we mentioned Philo, right? He's playing the vast majority of that game. How the heck did Georgia Tech do it? I know you were there. Just walk us through that game.
Oh man, well, I think it had to do with Big Boy giving a live performance before the game. That was a huge key. No, I mean, it was one of the more inexplicable performances I think I've seen a team pull off. But credit to Brent Key and his folks for having a game plan and sticking to it, and then the kids buying into that game plan, right? I mean, like you said, we saw Aaron Philo win that game against NC State with that last-second touchdown. Everybody's unsure of Haynes King's status and this concept of game management. In fact, Damon Stoudemire has mentioned game management. I think he's been taking pages out of Brent Key's playbook, and this concept of all right, this is how we're going to manage the game. This is our path to victory. Everybody follow along, and let's do it. And I think the biggest thing to me that stands out in that game was Georgia Tech's defense, honestly, and the way they sort of controlled Cam Ward. I mean, Cam Ward is Cam Ward, but it's not like he threw for 600 yards and just blew up that Tech defense. They sort of allowed Cam to kind of do his thing, but not really destroy their morale and keep themselves in that game. That's really what stood out to me in the end, their ability to sort of just hang around to that fourth quarter and have that will and resolve to pull it out.
Well, it's fascinating the way you kind of lay it out there with, kind of just letting Cam do his thing. They only had 3 explosives. I mean, they threw it for, they caught 25 passes. You'd think there'd be more in there. There are only 3 explosives, and Georgia Tech shut down the run, completely, all the while running for, 270 plus on them with a one-arm quarterback who ran it 20 times. I mean, it's just, again, that speaks to Haynes King, but also just this coaching staff going to find a way. I mean, they're going to do whatever it takes. And I think that plays right into this Georgia game where, as KG alluded to, we're thinking that Haynes King is done. He's not going to be able to go play this young freshman, let him rip it. And what does he do but come in and have this Herculean effort where it's just time after time seeing him deliver in the biggest moments. And, of course it stinks the way it ends. You would love for Georgia Tech to have won that game. But they gave Georgia everything they wanted and then some. What was that kind of an indicator for you in that game?
They're not there yet, but they're inching closer and closer and closer to getting over that hump. What is it, 7 straight losses to Georgia now for the Yellow Jackets? I mean, it's just eating them alive, especially Brent Key. And he's been on record saying that. I mean, he said he's got the screenshot on his phone now, the scoreboard. There's all the pictures of him standing on the field after the game, staring it down. I mean, I was on the sideline. I watched it happen. I left the press box with 8 minutes to go thinking this is going to be an epic celebration down here on the sideline. I was not dressed properly for those final 8 overtimes, freezing down there on the sideline, watching everybody running back and forth. It was, I think Herculean is a great word for Haynes King. I mean, the way he just sort of put his shoulder down, had blood all over his knee. Again, old school movie moment, right? And right. I think even in the losing effort, I mean, that performance will go down in that clean old fashioned hate rivalry story. I mean, because it was something to behold and really fun to watch. And that being said, I know it's going to eat at them all season. Kyle Eford made no bones about it in 2023 that it ate him up all season going into 24. So these guys want to beat Georgia more than anything. I know that's going to be a driving force in this summer.
Can we also just all agree after the third overtime, like, let's just stay at the end zone we are. We don't need the back and forth. Can we just stay at the end zone that we're at?
Yeah.
I think that tired everybody out more than anything. Like,
unbelievable.
Plays
what are
were
we
fine.
doing?
It was just like, why? Okay, all right, okay.
That was crazy. And I'm not sure, like, there are coaches who, lost the national championship or lost a game that kept them out of the playoff or whatever. I'm not sure I saw a coach all year beat up from just mentally the way Brent Key looked at the end of that game. And I think as a Georgia Tech fan, obviously in the moment it's terrible, but you love that because he cares so much. Like, can you just speak a little more, Chad, about Brent Key, how right Georgia Tech got this? And what do you think kind of his ceiling it? Like, is he the guy almost, maybe the one guy out there besides, like, I don't know, Nick Saban coming out of retirement that could truly take Georgia Tech to where its potential could be? Does that make sense?
I think so, because I think there's a sense that he's building for the long haul.
Right. He's not using this as a stepping stone. Like, that's not him.
We're so quick to look at, this microwave society, to look at results and what just happened. But the way he's been recruiting, the way he's built his staff, the way he discusses how he studies NFL teams in terms of the draft, like the Detroit Lions and the Niners and the Chiefs, and roster management, the way he works the portal, the way he builds his off the field staff and recruiting relations. It's not just a quick fix, right, so to speak. I mean, he's all in it. I mean, he loves his alma mater. That's clear to anybody who talks to him. That's clear when he loses the Georgia game, how much it destroys him inside. So I think there's no doubt he wants to take this Georgia Tech football program into that upper echelon of the Clemsons of the world and the Notre Dames of the world and the Ohio States of the world. Does that sound crazy? Of course it does right now, but why not? I mean, he believes that it's his alma mater. He believes it's the greatest institution in the world, and he wants to make the football team one of the best football programs in the United States.
Yeah, and I just think there's something different that he can provide than any other coach can that's not at their school. Like, obviously Kirby can do the same thing at Georgia, and it's hilarious that Georgia Tech, they're both have alumni leading the way there, but it's a big deal. I mean, there's not going to be a guy that's more passionate about the place than him. He chose it, however many years ago, and he's choosing it again now. And I think the biggest thing is the support from the university, that what Jay has been able to come in and do, and the facilities and the buy-in and the money. That's a big deal, and committing to him. I mean, the extension that he got, all these different things. So it's great to see that. It really is, and it's fun to just see Georgia Tech at that level and hopefully continue to rise and where they can be. I mean, this is a school that has national championships. It's a big deal. So anyway, it's exciting to see that. Looking at statistically some guys before we move on to 25 here. We mentioned Jamal Haynes earlier. That guy is just a warrior. I mean, he's the teeniest guy I've ever seen. And he has such a big punch, such a big personality. Literally at any moment, he can house it. And you just never know. I can't remember if it was this year or 2 years ago where he has that walk-off touchdown against North Carolina.
North Carolina this year,
This year, yeah. And it's just it's crazy to see his explosive nature. What I guess have you seen from him over the years as he's developed into, I guess, this Final Four next year?
Well, similar to Haynes King, I mean, the toughness and the perseverance has just gone to a different level. He was dealing with a foot injury for most of the season. I heard at one point he had a shoulder issue. Something may have happened to his fingers. I mean, it's funny that they filmed The Walking Dead here in Atlanta, because the Georgia Tech football team was similar to, like, arms hanging and just like walking to the field, like limbs falling off, barely holding themselves together. And Jamal Haynes was part of that. I remember, was it the, I can't remember which game. He had the huge run to start the game, 65, 70 yards, and then was knocked out on the next play and didn't come back. The Virginia Tech game, he left briefly and came back. But that kid is just so tough. And Brent Key talks about toughness all the time. And it's not just putting your shoulder down, your head down, and running over someone tough. It's getting up after a tackle for a loss. It's getting up after a hard hit. It's going back out there when every single bone and muscle in your body is aching. And Jamal Haynes embodies that. I think what's going to help him in 25 is having some help. Georgia Tech's running back room is going to be much deeper than it was in 24. That's not anybody's fault. They just were banged up. A lot of injuries in that running back room in 24. He's going to have a lot of help in 25. He's going to be healthier in 25. I'm sure he's going to be stronger and faster in 25. And I expect him to have another really, really good season for this Tech football team.
Yeah, and he's awesome to talk to as well. We've had him on. He's great. You know, one of the biggest improvements this year for Georgia Tech, and we talked about it a lot preseason, was the defense. I mean, the defense was so much better. And you look at certain games where they really kept him in it. Miami game, we talked about that. Where do we go from here, Chad? Because Tyler Santucci has left, the defensive coordinator. He's off to the Ravens. That just happened as we're recording this. It's a real bummer. I think that a lot of Georgia Tech fans are probably very disappointed in that happening. Yeah. Where do you see Georgia Tech going from here?
Well, I think both things can be true. I think it's disappointing for Georgia Tech. It's a punch to the gut. But the Baltimore Ravens aren't hiring away your coach if he wasn't a good coach and didn't put your defense in a great position. And I think Brent Key, any good head football coach, has their Rolodex, has their binder, has names stored in their phone just in case something happens. With the way they're recruiting, I think that the personnel and the athletes are there. They just got to find the right hire to continue this on, because you're right. Tyler Santucci was a godsend for that Georgia Tech defense. They were really bad in 23, and you guys know that. Could not get off the field on third down, could not stop the run. It did a complete 180 in 2024. I mean, it was one of the best rush defenses in the ACC. It was interesting because they couldn't sack the quarterback. They couldn't get any TFLs. They had hardly any takeaways, and yet they just had that massive turnaround under Tyler Santucci. So a big disappointment that he's gone. But again, Brent Key's got some guys that he can call up and gauge their interest on this position. I think it's going to be a coveted job because, again, this is a program that appears to be on the rise. So they just got to make the right hire and keep it going, and I think Tech fans believe that they will.
Do you have a list of guys? I mean, by the time this comes out, maybe you'll be hired. But is there some names that you've seen, or guys that wish lists for Georgia Tech fans?
No, not anybody specifically. It'll be curious to see whether Brent Key makes that hire like that to get this installed in the spring, or maybe if he slow plays it and say, let's see what happens with some of the coaching carousel here in the spring. Is it somebody already on staff? Corey Peoples, the secondary coach, has got some experience, has been around forever. Jess Simpson on the defensive line has been around forever. Maybe it's a co-defensive coordinator system. Do you bring in a young guy? Do you bring in a vet? So I think the list of names will be far and wide. I know before he hired Buster Faulkner to be his offensive coordinator, that list was extensive of guys he could choose from. So it'll be curious to see how much time he takes in this hire, and then B, which direction he goes, because again, Brent Key's been around 20, 25 years in this business. He knows a lot of guys, and he knows how important this hire is, and I think he'll get it right.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And he hasn't missed really yet. I mean, I've loved every hire he's made. Yeah. He's done a really good job looking at that. Well, speaking of looking ahead, let's talk about 25. We have the schedule. You're again, we kind of say this the last couple of episodes, but we know now, and we can look at them and we can break it all down, kind of what's happening and where you got. Is there anything just looking at the top that was interesting to you, or that made you raise your eyebrow, or that you really like about Georgia Tech's schedule for
Coach
25?
Prime?
Yeah, I mean, there's three that jump out to me immediately. The opener at Colorado is going to be awesome. One, because we don't know I don't study Colorado. I don't cover. Nobody knows what they're going to be, right? I mean, with what they lost and the way they work the transfer portal, going out there. How does Georgia Tech approach that? Do they approach it similar to Dublin, like this is a business trip, we're going out to win a football game? It's going to be a hostile environment, conversely, so that'll be curious to see. Clemson early in the year, missed them in this past season, but get them back again. ACC championship and a perennial playoff contender, a huge rival. Having to play Colorado and Clemson early in the year is really tough. But, if they can get through that, that's a great sign for them. And then that Syracuse game, man, there's some beef there, weirdly. I don't think we ever thought there'd be Syracuse-Georgia Tech football beef, but here we are. Fran Brown made a big deal last year out of Brent Key's comments, which I don't think Brent Key knew that he was making. So the Orange come to Atlanta, I think, with what Syracuse did in their first year under Fran Brown was big. And so, I mean, that could be like an early, title game preview. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, if Syracuse is as good as they were last year and if Georgia Tech is on the rise, that could be a huge game in the ACC standings. So those are three right off the bat that I kind of look at.
Give me all the Syracuse Georgia Tech beef. I mean, conference realignment is taking away some of our traditional rivalries. So we need some new ones, and I'll go Georgia Tech Syracuse. But you're right, to get Colorado Clemson your first 3 weeks is interesting. But even though they bring Clemson back, obviously they play Georgia, I still think this is probably the most manageable schedule that Brent Key's ever had at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Or that they've had in the last couple of years, because you have Georgia, but you have no Notre Dame, you have no Florida State, you have no Miami, like all that kind of thing, and no crazy non-conference like Ole Miss or something like that.
Yeah.
So what would you say expectations wise is kind of what we should expect from Georgia Tech, like a win number, something like that?
Well, I think the expectation needs to be better than 7 wins.
Yeah.
2 years in a row with 7 wins. I think Brent Key would agree with that. Like it's time to take the next step, whether that's 8 wins, 9 wins. It's time to be a contender to make the ACC title game, not necessarily to make it, but be in that discussion come November, right? Like to be a 7-win, 8-win team about that time, and to show progress with all these recruits, top 25 recruiting class coming in, one of the best recruiting classes in the ACC, with the guys they got coming back. This is year 3 now. They can't have these letdowns like a Virginia Tech on the road, like a Syracuse on the road last year. They got to start winning some of these games, and I think. Not to say the fan base is going to be up in arms with pitchforks and torches if they don't reach that level, but I think that's going to be the expectation inside the clubhouse. Like, let's take that next step. Let's get 8, 9 wins. It's time to turn the corner and show that this Georgia Tech team and this program is a force to be reckoned with for the future.
Right, as it should be. When you have the guys coming back that you do, you have the head guy coming back, all these different things. Chad, this was great. Thank you for your time. Thanks for helping us break this down. It's going to be really exciting just to see what Georgia Tech can do this coming year, man. So appreciate you. Grateful for you. Always great seeing you.
Thanks again to Chad for joining us. Make sure you check out his awesome work. He does a really good job covering Georgia Tech. We appreciated his insight on this one, Mac. And of course, as we talked about earlier, you saw the ad presented by our great friends over at Ingles. Make sure you support them. Get ready, Mac, and all the other men, because that is the majority of people who watch this. Valentine's Day is approaching. Get ready. Don't drop the ball.
That's
man.
right.
Don't
That's
drop
right.
the ball.
Go to Ingles, get some flowers, get some candy, her favorite candy.
Be prepared.
Maybe a teddy bear, maybe some balloons. Load up, okay? And if you have any kids, get it for them too. They need to know. They need to see and be celebrated. That's a great point, KG. Go to Ingles, get all your Valentine's Day stuff. We're going to get out of here. We got to go. So appreciate you guys.
Max got to go to Ingles.
That's right. I got to run. I got to go get some stuff. Appreciate y'all always. Jump over to the channel, subscribe, jump on here, turn your alerts on, all that. Jump in the comments too. Tell us what you think about Georgia Tech. I just did some radio this morning down in Alabama with Greg McElroy, and I think they're going to be good. We were going back and forth about some Georgia Tech and the things that they're going to bring to the table. So appreciate you guys. Until next time, we'll see y'all.